Hello everyone and welcome to my Season 11 full AD Renekton guide. My name is Godrekton, also known as Ryan. I'm a Masters level Renekton one-trick pony on the EUS server and I have a total of over 4.5 million mastery points. I originally started playing Renekton back in the days of Season 4 and ever since then Renekton has evolved and branched out into many different playstyles, which overall have changed his identity from being an early game bully that rushed into tank items such as Sunfire Cape to a more modern bruiser or full AD carry style champion.
Does he not know who I am? Goddamn! Get that goddamn!
I want to kill him though. Come back, Ezreal. Get that goddamn! Being the Renekton enthusiast that I am, I played Renekton with a variety of different and unique builds and playstyles, with the intention of finding various builds that suit my own strengths as a player, but also for the interest of others. One of the playstyles that interested me the most and brought my full potential out as a player was the full AD playstyle. With this upcoming season being the most diverse and versatile yet of how you can play Renekton or just any other champion in the game, I've set myself a task to play everything new that's been introduced within the preseason. Within this video, however, our main topic is centered around finding the best full AD Renekton playstyle, and from my current testing with the new items, I've recently come to the conclusion that the full AD Renekton playstyle will be its strongest ever, with it being taken to the next level by the new Mythic item, Prowler's Claw. Before I get deep into the video, I do want to clarify that this video is made in the preseason. A lot of items are scheduled to change, and with this being a really strong item in my own opinion, I personally expect this to be changed at some point. If this is the case, however, I will re-update my thoughts and opinions within the comments below. So, what is Prowler's Claw? Prowler's Claw is one of the newly introduced items within the pre-season Mythic lineup of items. Prowler's Claw provides the user with a point-and-click dash targeting at enemies only. Upon dashing to the target, the user applies 15% amplified damage, similar to how Press the Attack works. This then lasts for 3 seconds, allowing up to immense damage on whatever champion you are playing. With each Mythic item having Mythic bonuses, Prowler's Claw provides the user with 5 additional lethality per every legendary item completed. This does not include boots for reference, only items such as Ghostblade, Infinity Edge, Rabadons, you get the point. And lastly, the item provides us with 60 AD, 10 ability haste and 21 lethality. Overall, from what we can gather so far, is that this item has a great stat lineup for Renekton. Renekton loves AD items that give him high AD, ability haste, lethality. This is just perfect, and if you was a Ghostblade user from last season or before that, the components are exactly the same, with it being Warhammer and Serrated Dirk, allowing you to have a really strong snowballing early game. Okay, so what? The item gives us a dash, it gives us some decent stats, but why is this our Mythic item of choice? Well, when you take into consideration that full AD Renekton's biggest problem was being too flash reliant, this basically solves our issues. We're able to easily reach the backline with a point and click dash, and it gives us less pressure as players in trying to end out games. Renekton can't just dash in there with his regular E. There's way too much CC in the game stopping him from doing that these days, and if you are to do that on a full AD Renekton playstyle, you simply get blown up. And if we are to go more tanky and do the same thing, we then don't have the damage necessary to kill the targets, leading us to only one reasonable outcome, and that's using our flash. But if our flash is a 5-minute cooldown, how are we going to do anything before that if our flash is on cooldown? So if our flash is on cooldown, what is the only other alternative to this situation? We have to rely on our teams. And being that it's solo queue, we can't always guarantee that our teammates are going to help us set up plays. This is where this item allows us to be more independent with the game. We can get onto the targets with relative ease without any issues whatsoever. This is why I just think it's personally the best item you can go for full AD Renekton. And while this item does give a dash that is super helpful, it's not only about the dash. It's about the stat line allowing us to snowball even harder earlier on in the game, and also the fact that this dash gives us 15% amplified damage onto our target, meaning our fast combos are even more deadly than they were before. Let's talk about the pros and cons of Prowler's Claw. Starting with the pros, this item allows you to have destructive one-shot power. Compared to every previous iteration of the full AD build, this item alone gives you so much power compared to anything else that's ever been in the game for Renekton. Going a build path with this item allows you to 1v1 any tank in the game that has over 200, 300, even 1000 armor with the components you buy and just the items itself. That's not even talking about the actual dueling potential it has either. Upon getting this item, you're allowed to literally 1v1 anything in the game. This leads on to our second pro of being a crazy snowballing potential item. As I mentioned earlier, the components give you a serrated dirk and a Coldfield's Warhammer. Both of these have always been good throughout Renekton's history. Upon completing Prowler's Claw, you now have an insane power spike like nothing you've ever seen before. This item is literally the equivalent of a Jax being 0-5 and then buying a Blair Rune King back in Season 10. So what I'm trying to say is, you could be 0-10 on Renekton, but as soon as you buy this item, you're literally going to go like 20 kills. It's really that broken. Now, while I am over exaggerating a little bit on that, I'm not even kidding. You can literally be behind now and come back from the item alone. And this gives Renekton a great strength in what was a weakness before. Our next pro is that the item is literally a higher risk and high reward item. For the Renekton players that are super mechanical and try and do their best and the hardest to make the plays necessary to win the game, this item gives you even more of a reward, allowing you to catch the people necessary to get objectives or just winning the game. And as I already mentioned before, this item has a 60-second cooldown, but can be reduced to 45 seconds if you take the Ingenious Hunter rune in the Domination tree. So every 45 seconds, you can literally one-shot someone, giving you up to 6.5 uses before your flash comes up, being a really important tool to making more plays possible. When you also consider this item, another pro is that you have up to 4 dashes available, making it very mobile for Renekton to reach targets and also get out of situations. And the 4 dashes in mind are your Slice and Dice, your Flash, and now your Prowler's Claw. Another pro that I would also say is just the fact that this item rewards skill expression. So similar to my point about being a mechanical Renekton player, this gives you even more room to do combos, to get out of sticky situations. It allows you to do everything, and this is down to how you play as a Renekton player. So the better you are, the more use you're going to get out of this item. Another great thing about this item is that it allows you to scale even harder through a game. Stereotypically, Renekton's problem of being outscaled was more so that he couldn't carry the damage and also be a reliable champion to reach the backline. But with this item now fixing these issues, it allows you to scale even harder, allowing you to express your full AD playstyle at its fullest. With every pro there is a con, and some of the cons with this playstyle is that you are even more weaker than you normally would be. With the introduction of new items, there's many different playstyles that can make you even more tanky and even more of a sustained threat. But a problem with this build you may have is that you are too weak to survive some of the damage incoming at you. Season 11 is going to be a really interesting season. There's a lot of damage items, there's a lot of tank items, there's a lot of everything in this season. And being a glass cannon can be a really tricky situation in some games, meaning that it's going to be really hard to pull off your kit without being one-shot. Another con that kind of just feeds into the full AD playstyle itself is that you're actually very feast or famine. By definition, feasting is the ability to snowball on your opponents and gain a huge lead. Famine, however, is the starvation of being put at a disadvantage. With that, if you are behind with this playstyle, while I did mention you can come back with a new Prowler's Claw, it is still a really bad position to be in. So, while you may have a chance in some games, it's not going to be a consistent thing. You are going to be struggling for gold if you do fall behind, and that's why you should never aim to be in this position. Another con that this item does have is that it's not always ideal to rush, and this is more so because tank items have way more damage this season. If you are going to rush a Prowler's Claw into a tank, for example, or even a bruiser champion, you're going to find yourself at a disadvantage at times when they build armor, allowing them to outscale you in the early side of the game until you buy your items. The way to get around this is actually buying another item, and this is where one of my builds is going to come in handy for this. Another problem you may have on Renekton while building Prowler's Claw is that you actually need a really good mechanical understanding of how Renekton works. Buying this item doesn't just mean you one-shot everything, it actually comes down to your own combos and your own understanding of fury management. Personally, as someone that's played as many games that I have on Renekton, I still see many Renekton players that fail to mechanically execute combos or fury management in the moments that it's needed. And with an item like Prowler's Claw where you have to commit 100% to killing your target, you really need to make sure you're doing things right. In the future, I will be revamping my current Renekton guide for mechanics, but it will be in the form of a series called Mastering Renekton. This will be in a couple of months when I get a better understanding of next season, so be on the watch for that because it will lead to all the secrets that I know about mechanics. Another con that does come with this item is that you need to be very proactive with your leads. This isn't just an item thing, however, it is basically just a common Renekton problem people have. With Renekton's identity being more of an early game and mid game champion, that does put pressure on you to make sure you're ending the game at these times. If you stall out too much in the late game, you're going to find yourself struggling even more. So it's really important to understand the macro element of abusing your lead to take ejectors in order to end the game. And finally, with this playstyle, it does require a lot of income. Back to the second point of being feast or famine, you have to get ahead. You really need to put everything you can in order to make a lead. And with this lead, it needs to be consistent. It needs to keep going up on like a graph, for example. It needs to keep rising up throughout the entire game. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself struggling at certain points just because you're not getting that gold lead. So make sure you're taking every camp, you're getting the kills that you need, your farm. Make sure that you're getting as much income as possible. When looking at the other mythic items for Renekton, we associate items such as Goredrinker, Eclipse, Sunfire Cape, and maybe niche mythics such as Strybaker or Sunderer. I personally think that Godrekton and Prowler's Claw are the way to go on Renekton. However, if I had to pick between the two, I'd probably still pick Prowler's Claw 9 out of 10 times. If Renekton is no longer gated by a stereotypical and age-old problem of being permanently kited, even with a clunky dash ability, why not take advantage of that with Prowler's Claw? It also removes the biggest weakness of the full AD playstyle problems later on in the game, which was being too heavily flash reliant. Now that we have Prowler's Claw, in the time our flash comes up, we have up to 6 uses of this item, an item that has longer range than Renekton Z and flash. The item is also a point and click dash which amplifies 15% of your damage, allowing you to fast combo before the amp damage buff is gone. So, why should we not build this item to abuse Renekton's high AD scalings as well as his combo one-shot potential? While Goredrinker is great and provides Renekton with the best bruiser variant in forever, I would still rather play Renekton as a high damage champion. I just think kit-wise there's many better bruiser champions. I also find that if you are going to play Renekton with his bruiser variant build, for example, there's too many holes that can be exploited. One of these is being kited. There's just way too much moon speed or CC abilities in this upcoming season to buy enough time to kill Renekton in such a style. And when you are trying to optimize for such problems, you don't really have enough room to totally avoid these problems, as you find yourself facing another problem within the game of lacking one type of resistance or damage to killing opponents later on in the game. If there is a strength Goredrinker has over Prowler, it is the sustain and tank ability the item provides. You can be in the middle of a team fight and buy enough time to tank the damage and allow your team to follow up behind you while the enemy is occupied on yourself. In the past, you would not have this sustain to rely on, however this is most likely to be nerfed as we move into the next season, so this should be considered. The ability haste mythic is also a great factor with this item. In builds you can achieve over 100 ability haste, allowing for more combo potential and ways to stay in a fight. Furthermore, giving Renekton better ability within teamfights. I also think that healing reduction is greatly improved compared to previous seasons, to which may cause problems when relying on this playstyle game to game. If you are playing in more of a combatant rank, for example, you're barely able to get away with full lifesteal or heal based playstyles just because the enemies actually itemize against it. Overall, I suggest you to play both playstyles and see what you prefer the most. I just personally think if you're looking to play team based, you go Goredrinker. If you're planning to play more carry based for solo queue games, Prowler is definitely the way you want to go, as it gives you the ability to remove anyone from the game, allowing you and your team to punish enemies in various ways. When talking about other mythics, Eclipse currently has a sizable amount of followers that truly believe this is his highest damaging mythic item, even in comparison to Prowler's Claw. However, this just isn't accurate, to which will soon be compared shortly. My biggest problem with this item is just how the item works, as well as the development history. When we consider that on the PB this item was originally given 50% max health damage, to which it's now 6% after being hotfixed from 8% on live, it doesn't really stick out to me being that whole much stronger. The movement speed gain was also reduced from 30% to 15%, the shield is also just a really weird design element in my opinion. It seems like this item is trying to cater to bruisers but also for assassins. It caters for survivability but procs at such a weird time, where in most cases when it goes off, the enemy just can't attack, wasting the usage of a shield for a champion like Renekton at least. The item cooldown is currently set at 6 seconds, however being nerfed to 8 seconds as of patch 10.24. This just makes it even more of a weak option if you are considering a Mythic on Renekton, such as this. I haven't even explained the main problem yet either. The item is just so front loaded in the beginning. It takes 2 basic attacks abilities to proc, then all your damage is just seemingly gone, which feels super clunky to me, and I often find enemies just surviving on too little health where the item just doesn't give me enough satisfaction on Renekton compared to other options at least. Sunfire is currently one of the most broken items in the game, leading to an upsurge of tanks dominating the game currently. However, I doubt this will remain, and I'm really not bothered trying to cater to this playstyle, as it will be nerfed as far as from being a considerable option in the future. As for Stridebreaker, I just think the dash is way too small to be relatively considered. The combos work exactly the same way as Goredrinker if you are wondering too, although the slow that comes with the active just feels super clunky to me, and it will most likely be underutilized as Renekton most likely will use Stridebreaker for combos when compared to Goredrinker. As for the two items, I just think that Godrekton is way superior for an option. They both nearly do identical damage, but I just think if you are playing Renekton in a bruiser aspect, I just think going Godrekton makes sense for the active and also for the passive, which gives you more AD for the lower health you are. The only case you can really make for Stridebreaker is the Mythic passive. You gain 3% bonus speed per legendary item you purchase. I personally just don't think this is enough to warrant buying for Renekton. Most people actually counter this playstyle problem taking Ghost on Renekton. And a lot of people are currently doing that too with Goredrinker, so if you do want to go on that playstyle then by all means go ahead. I just think it's more worthwhile to take Ghost than go on an item like Stridebreaker, which definitely gets outscaled with what you want to do with it. Sunderer is certainly a decent option, although the Sheen active just isn't designed in Renekton's favour. Renekton's combos are about being fast and catered around your Fury, which means you can't really spread it out or get your combos low enough with a build like this to abuse such a Sheen active. If anything, it hurts your damage per second and just makes it too less of a considerable option. So, as I alluded to earlier with Eclipse, I actually took the time out to test every one of these items to compare what the highest damage was. With these tests, I'm looking for the fastest DPS that can blow practice tool dummies up from a set amount of health and resistance threshold. I will also be testing both Press the Attack and Conqueror for runes, so I can gather a wide range of results that can cater to most popular builds. On the topic of runes, I will also be using Last Stand. This is more of an indicator on our maximum output from lower health thresholds, therefore giving us more results on what the highest damaging build is. So, for our first test, let's assume that we are level 9 and we just picked up our first mythic item. The dummies will be set at around 1.3k health with 50 resistances to replicate squishy champions. Our main combo for the first couple of tests is the following combo, which looks something like this. I personally think before I do these tests, Prowler's Claw will probably be the most highest damaging item spike. I truly believe in it that much because of how strong this item is, and will most likely be the clear option for damage builds. With that being said, here are the results. From our first test with the following combo, I kind of got a great array of results with PTA and Conqueror. However, as I suspected, just with how PTA works, the rune will most likely always be out damaging Conqueror if you plan on doing quick burst combos. Conqueror does not get enough shine unless you're in longer fights to where you can maximise the damage output. And with how Renekton's designed anyways, the whole goal of just taking keystones or playing Renekton in general is to one-shot people, and you don't really look for longer fights. That's why I also think that Press the Attack is just the most viable option. Anyhow, the first test concluded that Prowler's Claw both scored the highest on both tests from full health and low health in a damage perspective. Just for fun, I also decided to chuck in a Blair the Ruin King. I personally think that this is still a really good rush item alternative into tank bruiser champions. As I also suspected, this came out to be one of the fastest forms of DPS from a level 9 standpoint, however slightly doing less damage from the final results. Although it did less damage, we have to consider the DPS. If I used more auto attacks that dropped it down to the same DPS as everything else, I'll technically still be out damaging the other items. So overall, we can say that Prowler's Claw and Blair Ruin King are our best item choices, while other items including Eclipse are actually one of the more disappointing ones from a damage and DPS perspective. All of the other item choices are roughly the same damage from health, disregarding Sunder that is. Although below 15 to 10% threshold they're actually out damaging Eclipse, which for the spoiler of these remaining tests is quite the following trend as we're about to see. Our next test is set at 2.3k health with 100 resistances, resembling a mid to late game target with built armor items and a fair amount of scaled health. Our items of choice with the Mythic will be a Blair Ruin King and Black Cleaver. Here are the results. Following similar ranks from the previous test, Prowler's Claw still remains at the top regardless of Keystone, while Stridebreaker and Goredrinker are still pretty neck and neck at full health. For reference too, Stridebreaker only has a little bit more AD given on the item, but once the lower health creeps in, Godrekton makes up for the damage from the passive AD gain the lower health the player reaches. So pretty much identical results, however the DPS numbers on Stridebreaker are probably a little bit questionable, and I think that's just more of me messing my combos up a few times, but in reality it doesn't really matter too much, as by the time I finish my combo, the damage will be at a similar health point despite a few artics more. Another interesting thing that we do notice is that Eclipse is starting to fall off heavily. This is due to the item design of the damage being front loaded, meaning you don't have anything else to rely on aside from items. So now that our second test is done, it's fine to move on to the final result. Our final and last test will have a dummy set at 3.5k health with 350 resistances, with our items of choice being our Mythic with Blair Ruin King, Black Cleaver, Shreldia's Grudge, Ravenous Hydra and a Red Potion. Before I show the results, I will say that trying to do all this was a little ridiculous because of red pot timing out. That means I had to make sure I did the combo multiple times to prove it being accurate, so you can kind of imagine how annoying this might have been for me, and let me tell you, it was a lot of hours I spent on all this. Because our dummy is now set at a more unrealistic game-to-game stat value, unless you're a tank that is, we now get a better understanding which item is going to do the most damage the longer a fight is. The beauty about Renekton, especially this upcoming season, is that you can actually nuke everything in the game if you build the following items I've listed as my items of choice. From this test we will also be changing the combo to the following, which looks something like this. With that being said, here are the final results. So in conclusion, with all the Mythic items being tested with Press the Attack and Conqueror, Prowler's Claw is always doing the most reliably fast and highest output damage, no matter what combo you're trying to do, as long as using the active that is. Although this damage test isn't to say that this item is the best all around, I'm just saying if you're going to play the full AD playstyle, Prowler is simply the way to go. With this test we're also able to confidently say that Goredrinker and Prowler's Claw are both the way to go if you want damage at least, while everything else is more so overrated or simply too mediocre for considering. Sunder. Now it's time to move on to the fun stuff, being the Prowler's Claw mechanics. With many items being introduced and reworked this season, there are many different and new exciting mechanics I've discovered since the release of them. Prowler's Claw is very interesting in the fact that Renekton has some new crazy combo synergies for one-shotting, along with the fact that there's many new animation cancels and skill expressive elements, making it a very rewarding item overall. Firstly, with how the item works, upon using the active, you dash behind your enemy, similar to how Z ult works, where you end up behind your target. This could be abused in many different ways of dodging abilities, with the active being used to dodge skill shots. While this is great, there is a problem however with this mechanic. Champions such as Vayne that can buffer their condemn as you dash onto them, it can actually just end up cancelling your Prowler's Claw damage and the amplification when timed on the dash, resulting in you being knocked back and left in a very awkward position. Another problem that can occur is that if champions go out of vision with a stealth ability or just simply go into the fog of war, it can actually cancel the cast altogether. Luckily it does not go on cooldown, so it isn't too much of a big problem, but it is just something to factor. With Prowler's Claw being point and click and targetable onto enemies only, you are able to use it on any jungle camp, minion, champion, enemy pets, dragon or even baron, just for reference. Prowler's Claw allows Renekton to cancel his Q animation. To pull this off, you simply just Prowler's Claw then Q and right click both at the same time. This pretty much functions the same way as any other Q cancel with Renekton's E. However, compared to the EQ auto attack combo, this one sometimes has a slight delay. Sometimes, however, as I mentioned, there is a slight delay right at the end of the cast. This is most likely due to Renekton's Q animation stun lock. Although this seems pretty RNG while at times you can actually Q auto attack without any delay at all, I think it just comes down to finding the right input, and either way in actual games this won't hurt you at all. With Q auto attack also being a way of cancelling Renekton's Q animation, you can also QW just like you can with the EQW combo. But the same problem also arises, which is that there is still a delay element in this, although I think it just comes down to finding the right input timing. So the more we master ourselves with this item active, the more consistent we can Q cancel. Another interesting find about his Q is that Prowler's Claw actually carries along the Q damage. So what I mean by this is that if Renekton Qs, the damage is instant, so if you was to Q then flash, the damage would not carry over to the area you flashed in. However, if you Prowler's Claw then Q, the damage will actually follow along. This could be a very interesting mechanic to how we play teamfights. We could reach the backline while buffering our Q animation following along to our target, dealing multiple damage and then allowing us to one-shot the backline while also weakening the front line. Prowler's Claw does not cancel any other animations. I tried with his W, his E and his R, but they don't seem to cancel at all, and instead happen at the end of his cast. Although there was an interesting thing that I found with Renekton's E. Renekton is actually able to cancel the Prowler's Claw animation. Now while this seems really cool and you could do some amazing combos like I'm probably showing right now, there's actually a downside to this. So, if we Prowler's Claw onto a target then press our E, we cancel the animation. But as you can see here, we also cancel the damage. Therefore, we're not actually applying the amplified damage passive onto the target, therefore making this a really pointless find, but it's also interesting to know just so you don't mess up combos. While I am doing this, you can also see that my E is actually shortened too. Like at the end of the dash, you can see my E is slightly travelling along and then landing on top of my target. I get my dice, but again, I don't apply the damage active from Prowler's Claw. The only way I can see this being a decent thing is when, if there's a fight going on and you Prowler's Claw in, and your teammates die at the same time, you actually have time to cancel out of it. And while I also found this, I also found out you can also flash out of it. However, there's two different interactions with this. If you decide to Prowler's Claw and flash right at the beginning of the animation, it actually pulls you into the target. While if you flash while you're travelling in the Prowler's Claw, you actually cancel the cast and the damage application altogether. So, like E, it isn't really an ideal thing to do. If anything, you always just want to use this separately to your E and your flash. One Prowler's Claw mechanic I did forget to mention originally in the video is that if someone flashes away and you time your Prowler's Claw to their flash timing, you can actually follow them all the way. This also works on other champion dashes such as Ezreal E, Samira dash, Yone ult, basically anything that allows them to position away from you, you can actually follow with Prowler's Claw. Now that we have an understanding for some mechanics, here are some main combos you should be working on to maximize your fullest potential of the new item Prowler's Claw. Here are the combos with the ability details. Now it's time to talk about the Prowler's Claw builds. For runes, I recommend taking Press the Attack, Triumph, Alacrity or Tenacity depending on the game. If the enemy has high CC based champions, Tenacity 100%. If they don't and you want to squeeze a little bit more DPS and have faster Fury gains, Attack Speed for sure. And lastly, Last Stand for the Precision Tree. I prefer Last Stand compared to Coup de Grace because Renekton utilises this super well, especially with his passive giving Renekton more Fury the lower health he is. Therefore, the extra damage from Last Stand allows you to outplay and have more confidence doing lower health outplays. And as I proved by my test, it does show quite a lot of damage improvement. My secondary tree is Domination, with Sudden Impact and Ingenious Hunter. Many people like to play around with their second tree. Honestly, it doesn't matter as long as you have Ingenious Hunter. This is giving us a 45% cooldown on our Prowler's Claw. This is super important to us as it allows us to spam the active more often, which means most of the time is a guaranteed kill whoever you use it on. I'm also a big fan of Sudden Impact because it gives us lethality each time we dash for 3 seconds. Considering that our one-shot combos come from the fact that we engage with our E, a flash, or now our Prowler's Claw, it gives us even more damage, which is the goal. When it comes to items, you have a variety of different styles you can opt into. For instance, my first build is catered to those playing against bruisers or tanks. In this build we rush a Blair Ruin King, which as we proved before is still a strong power spike, out damaging a lot of Mythics earlier on in the game. I think this is just the safest option, but also the best item that makes sense. Rushing Prowlers is kind of a hindrance because you don't always have that burst damage like we do with Bork. Because we're still fighting in a lane, possibly it's just more worthwhile to buy this item to maximise our chances of being our laners. And considering that the fact that tanks are a lot stronger next season, it's also in our best interest just to be able to fight them and not get outscaled earlier. And I personally think that it's an essential item even with its recent nerfs. Now we get our mythic item Prowler's Claw. At this point we're able to nuke everything in the game. We have our gap closer and crazy damage. Anything after this point is just making sure we're not falling behind in 1v1s or just damage in general. Our next item of choice is Black Cleaver. This gives us decent healthy stats, haste, more shred with its new passive. This just makes it unstoppable versus tanks now, as we have burst against them while still having immense damage against squishy champions. Our item after that is Shreldia's Grudge. You can make a case getting this before Black Cleaver. However, I just think that you're going to be too squishy, and buying Armor Pen is much better within the mid stages of the game, just because you're going to get more value out of it. And finally, for your last time, you can kind of build wherever you want to. It's really dependent on the game, so by that logic, if we even need a QSS item, a tank item, something that gives sustain, any of those will just do, honestly. Personally, I think Ravenous Hydra as a last time is pretty good. But you could also build this before Shreldia's Grudge if you wanted to. It's just kind of how you want to itemize your last two items. But me personally, I think this build gives you so much damage, cooldown reduction, and just versatile stats for the game. The only con about this build is your ability to stick on the champions. With Black Cleaver no longer having moon speed from Phage, it has become pretty weak to sticking on the champions, therefore being a problem against mobile teams. And considering the fact that the build lacks moon speed, it is a lot harder to be proactive from a game to game basis, but that's where our next build fixes this problem. Our next build is my personal favourite. This fixes the issues of being kited and allows us to be more proactive with our leads, while outputting crazy damage with barely any diminishing returns. Firstly, we have a choice of rushing either Blair Ruin King or Prowler's Claw. I think you rush Prowlers into champions that are squishy and you can stumble hard against, while Bork is against tanks and bruisers. If you start Bork, you want to rush Prowler's Claw right after next item. If you start Prowler's Claw, that's where you rush Ghostblade. Ghostblade gives us our next gear. It allows us to be super mobile on the map, allowing us to be anywhere at any given time, while giving us insane damage and increasing our damage dealt to anything that isn't a tank. The beauty of Ghostblade is that it's such a great fit for AD Renekton. You get so much value out of it, and for a champion that wants to 1v9 like Renekton, you have to be roaming and making sure you're trying to close out the game by being a threat on the map. Ghostblade's active provides Renekton the mobility we dream of, allowing us to reach targets even easier. While we do have a Prowler's Claw to gap close, gaining range could still be hard depending on the game. Ghostblade provides us with more insurance so we can reach our targets without any failure at all. With our third item, we buy what we haven't got already. So if we started Bork into Prowler, we get Ghostblade. If we get Prowler into Ghostblade, we get Blair Ruin King. That's just how it works. At this point again, like the first build, we can decide whether or not we want a Black Cleaver, or we want to be doing insane damage with Shreldia's Grudge. It's honestly up to you which one you want to build first. Just make sure you're picking up both of them so you can get the maximum damage available. This build then lets you destroy everything in the game. And for my last build, I have one more, but it is slightly a little bit more ridiculous. So like the second damage build, we have an early Ghostblade. This build is supposed to be against squishy champions that you can easily snowball against. So like the second build, we're getting our Prowler's Claw into our Ghostblade, but that's where we pick the Collector next, as our third item. This item is very interesting and a fun design overall. It gives you lethality, crit chance, and a decent amount of AD. Its passive also allows you to execute anyone under 5% health while gaining 25 gold. Combine this with Triumph and each kill will be making you a decent amount of gold that piles up. Some people dismiss this item, but I personally think it's a really valuable item for the clip that I'm about to show. So in this clip, I managed to get a pentakill. While I am pretty fed, it's still just a showing that if you do get ahead with this build, you can really just obliterate a whole team given the right fight. With this build being more fun against squishy teams, this is where you can decide your next items for yourself. Personally, if I'm going such a build like this, I am going to be building lethality items to maximise the lethality output, so that's where our next few items are pretty interesting. So the next two items I have in mind are usually Umbral or Edge of Night. I don't recommend Serpent's Fang. So while the stat line is great, you just have no need to deal damage to shields when you have your W already, which has a shield break mechanic. So realistically, I think if you're going to pick between the two items, if you want to be a little bit more tanky while having a little bit more damage, Edge of Night is the way to go. If you want some ability haste, but you want to clear some vision for your team, have some decent damage and lethality, then Umbral Glaive isn't a bad choice either. After we picked our item of choice, we can then pick up a Shreldia's Grudge. A common trend you might notice here is that this item is in every build, and that's just because the item is just so broken. It's just broken beyond belief. And finally, if you feel like you want a little bit more fun, you could sell your boots for a Phantom Dancer or Rapid Fire Cannon, for the additional crit chance synergizing with your collector. Out of the three builds, I'll most likely take the second variant the majority of my games, just because of how versatile it is game to game. It allows you to mix around the items and build accordingly to which item is appropriate for that time within the game. With that, these are just my personal builds that I probably find the best just for the full AD playstyle. So if you guys have any builds in particular that work well with Prowler's Claw, make sure to leave it in the comments down below. And to our final topic, it is now how to play with Prowler's Claw. Playing with Prowler's Claw is pretty straightforward. Your objective overall is making sure you're doing everything you can to out-macro the enemy team, which in meaning is basically taking every objective with the intention of ending the game. Your secondary objective is to one-shot the enemy carriers throughout the whole game, whether that's the duelist fighter top laner, the mage AP AD assassin mid laner, or the enemy bot lane carry. Really, it doesn't matter who it is, it's just making sure you kill their most valuable player. With Renekton being very naturally tanky, with the help of items in his ult, you're able to risk out on more greedy players and have a higher success rate in making them work. With the basic message established in every game, your plan should be something like this. I'll be including two different game plans for top and mid lane, as I play them both and they're very similar of how the full AD Renekton playstyle works. In the top lane, you have the opportunity of playing either Ignite or Teleport as a summoner. I personally prefer Ignite because it brings the most out of Renekton's kit. It allows you to be even more aggressive threat and allows you to quickly bypass your snowballing potential, something Teleport can struggle with on a consistent basis. The only problem Ignite has compared to Teleport is that if you do fall behind, you become very gold and XP starved to your lane opponent, depending on how the minion wave is positioned. Ignite is a double-edged sword, so you want to make sure you're playing these summoners perfectly with the understanding of the consequences. Teleport allows you to have a presence on the map at all times, and it also allows you to have a free get out of free jail card, allowing you to teleport back to lane without missing gold or XP, while also giving you the opportunity to play on the opposite side of the map, allowing you to pick up free kills or saving teammates. But in my own experiences in solo queue, I want to get ahead. I want to be the scariest motherfucker in the game. That comes with playing aggressive and taking high risks to get high rewards. Once you win your lane, you want to make sure you get your bot side ahead. This is ultimately the key in being able to close out the games. Majority of games, especially in high elo, are decided from bot lane, and it's in your win condition to play around this role and make sure they get the support they need before they coin flip the game out of control. Being the highest level in the game, it's relatively simple to actually just go bot lane. You are less likely to die or get one shot as you're against a much weaker role with the laner sharing duo XP. To make sure your play entirely works, ping your jungler or mid laner to follow your movement down bot lane for the best insurance you kill the enemy bot, allowing you to then take tower or the incoming dragon. You're playing for macro 101, taking everything one after another with a sensible tempo, backing when you have a gold necessary for items while setting up waves in inconvenient positions in a side lane for the enemy team to have to clear it, which then gives you time to rush into the enemy jungle, taking camps, killing junglers, providing vision or setting up flanks against the enemy team. So a lot of it after clearing bot lane and getting the towers necessary is just about split pushing. So what do we do later on in the stages of the game? We still need to play towards our objective of killing the enemy's biggest threats. This means always using the Prowler's Claw to get closer to targets and one-shotting them out of fights, giving you and your team a higher percentage of winning the game. Renekton in Season 11 is more catered towards the late game, with his many forms of damage sources, item synergies and 3 different forms of dashes, providing him with many tools to catch and nuke targets. So now that I've discussed top lane, I will be talking about mid lane. So mid lane works a little bit differently. In some matchups we need to play a little bit more passive to our level 6 spike. Upon reaching this and building a steady lead, we're able to nuke almost everything in the game, if we play our combos correctly, that is. Prowler's Claw in lane now gives us every access to kill anything standing near us. This is by far Renekton's strongest season ever of how much more impactful he can be within losing lanes. Now, being in these losing lanes gives us more of a clear-cut path to beating them, which is simply rushing Prowler's Claw. Upon reaching this, we're then able to Prowler's Claw W anyone, leading to a one-shot. So compared to top lane when I talked about bot lane, nothing really changes as far as going to bot lane. It's just that being in mid lane allows us to reach bot lane a lot quicker, therefore we are having more impact overall on the game. If we're top lane and we're playing with Ignite for example, we don't really have that luxury of just going bot lane, and even if we take TP, the opportunity to go there isn't always presentable. Because bot lane is such a problem in solo queue, it is a lot better for AD Renekton players to actually play mid, because while they can get ahead mid lane, they can also spread their lead across bot lane a lot easier, hence the whole reason why this role is definitely desirable. So our next step to carrying the game doesn't really change. We're still going to go bot lane as much as we can. Each time we push in waves against our struggling lane opponents, we can abuse our downtime in lane, going to our own bot, or providing vision around the bot side. Applying more vision is just as good as getting kills, as it gives our laners more confidence to do their own risky plays with the knowledge that we have vision against enemy junglers. But if there is an opportunity the enemy bot lane is overextended, you want to make sure you're abusing this by permanently ganking them. The whole game is about getting them ahead. You can't just be a selfish player in solo queue, you have to play with your team if you want to close out games. If you are smurfing in elos where you can get away with that, you can get away with it, but if you're in like Diamond or something like that, you have to play as a team to win games. When you are able to get your bot lane ahead, this gives you such an easier time in being able to close out the game, because then you can send your bot lane mid or top lane to take towers, and then you can decide to stay bot side and pressure them out from there. Everything else on the playstyle from mid applies the same way as top. We split side lane, rotate towards objectives each time the waves are pushed in to their towers. Or if we can as well, we can split push and kill anything that's in front of us. The same thing still stands, is that we're trying to play for picks, we're trying to kill the back lane, that is our goal. We're playing very macro focused, and that's what we should be doing to get the victories. With all this being said, that is pretty much it from my guide. If you're a seasoned veteran on the full AD playstyle, a lot of the landing phase or game plan stuff shouldn't be any new to you. Except we have even more stronger tools to abuse in Season 11, increasing our snowballing potential like no other season. I really do think that this season is ours for full AD Renekton players. I'm personally going to be trying my hardest to reach Grandmaster or Challenger next season with the help of these items. I also hope that all of you are even more inspired as I am with this newfound playstyle. If you managed to watch through the entire video, thank you very much for watching. I put a lot of time into this video, as I thought it would be necessary to share this. I truly believe this playstyle is the best way to play Renekton if you want to hard carry every game. I also think that this build is the most fun and skill expressive out of all of them. While you can still have success with other stuff, I just want you to give this a try and see for yourself. Furthermore, my message that I do want to get across to is that you can play whatever way you want to. There really is no boundaries. Renekton, or just any champion in the game at the moment, has been the most versatile yet, with all the new Mythic items presenting many different playstyles. So yeah, thank you very much for watching the video. That's all I have to say. If you want to join my Discord, make sure to click on the link below. I have a link on the screen too to my official Discord that you can ask me any questions or anything. There's also the Renekton Mains Discord, which I own, so make sure you're visiting both of them if you want to speak to me or the community itself. I also have a Twitter and Instagram if you want to follow that for any reason. I'm trying to be a little bit more active on those, so yeah, I'm just trying my hardest to get my socials out there. And I also stream as well, which the link is there too at the screen. I don't know what I'm going to put here, but there'll be something here. On the topic of streaming, I haven't really got a schedule yet, but I will be trying to stream a lot in the upcoming season. This is my first of many videos to come. Over the years, I've promised many people that I would make videos, and the biggest problem that I had with making videos was that I had to reach Masters first. This was more of a mindset thing that kept me back from making videos. Now that I've reached it in the previous season, I finally feel validated enough to actually start making videos. And now, while I want to make the best content there is on Renekton, and I do mean that, I think there has to be a lot done for this community, and I think I'm the right person to do it. So I will be trying my absolute hardest to bring the Renekton community the content they want. And that does mean no clickbait, some people, just to throw that out there. With the content too, I will be planning to make top lane and mid lane content, and also just psychology, like base stuff for like ranked. Like just any general tips as well, like just stuff I can make a video about and go in depth with it as a topic. I don't half-ass my, as you might know with this video. So with that, I will be doing the very best that I can to make the content available for top laners, mid laners, Renekton players, people that want to play ranked, everything. With all that being said, thank you. Thank you very much for watching my video, and have a good day and stay safe.